In today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know regarding the ternary operator in JavaScript. We're first going to kind of give you just an overview of how it works, and then we're going to get into some examples here later to give you a bit better understanding and some situations in which this operator might be most helpful. So the ternary operator is the only operator in JavaScript that allows for 3 operands, which is why this is called a ternary operator. And it's also called a conditional ternary operator. And the reason for this is because it allows you to evaluate some condition and then execute some expression depending on whether that condition evaluates to a true or false value. So it's very similar to using like an if-else statement within JavaScript. If some condition is true, then do this. Else, do this. And the syntax for a ternary operator is going to look like this. You're going to have some condition that you're evaluating. Following that condition, you're going to separate that by a space and then a question mark. So this is going to say, okay, is this condition a truthy or falsy value? And it's also important here to know what values are truthy and falsy. And I have different videos on going over that, because the way that this is going to work is you are going to put some condition in front of a question mark. And this is basically going to say, is this value truthy or falsy? If it is truthy, then you are going to execute the first expression following the question mark. Else, you are going to follow the first expression with a colon here, and then following that colon, this is going to be the expression that you execute if this condition is falsy. So you're going to evaluate this condition, you follow that by a question mark. That's telling JavaScript that, hey, this is the condition you want to evaluate. If this is truthy, then the expression that you put behind the question mark is going to execute. If it is falsy, you are then going to put a colon behind this expression number 1, and the expression that follows your colon is going to be the expression that executes. So if this is truthy, execute expression 1. Else, execute expression 2. Okay, so let me show you an example of how this works. So here on line 23, I define a constant called age, and I set that to 26. And then here on line 24, I define a constant called legal age, and I set that to 21. And then on line 26, here's where I use my ternary operator, in which I set the constant to drink is going to be the return value of my ternary operator. So here I have my condition, and what I do is I check, okay, is my age greater than or equal to the legal age? And then I follow that up by a question mark. So this is telling JavaScript that, hey, this is the condition I want to evaluate. And then if this condition is truthy, then I want you to execute this first expression following the question mark. So that would make this ternary operator evaluate to the value of beer. But if my condition is falsy here, then I'm going to enter my else statement right here, marked by this colon, and I'm going to execute this expression right here. And then this ternary operator is going to evaluate to the value of juice. So this is saying, if my age is greater than or equal to the legal age, then I want to return the value of beer. Else, I want to return the value of juice. So since my age is greater than or equal to my legal age right here, we should see that when I console log drink, that I get the value of beer, and I do. And then if I change my age to be below the drinking age to 20 here, and I run this code, you can see that I get the value of juice, because this condition evaluates to a falsy value. So then I run my else expression right here. Now, ternary operators, they are often used to check if a value is falsy or not, to kind of do a null check, so to speak. This is one of the kind of most common areas that I see a ternary operator use. So here in this example, I have a function called greeting. And greeting takes one argument, a person, and then what it does within my ternary operator is, and you will also see ternary operators wrote on separate lines pretty often, to where here, this is where I write my ternary operator. I assign the constant name to the return value of my ternary operator, in which I check, okay, my person here is going to be my condition. I just check person question mark. So what this is doing is it's checking, is person a truthy or falsy value? If it is truthy, then I want to return person.name and assign this name variable to person.name. But if it's falsy, Then I just want to assign name to the value of stranger. And then I just return howdy name. So here in my console.logs, if I call this function and I pass it the name Alice, well, my person here, it's going to be a truthy value because it's an object. So then it's going to assign name to this object .name, so Alice. But here in my second greeting call right here, I pass the value of null. But since null is a falsy value, it's going to check person, it's going to be null, so then it's just going to go into this else statement since it's falsy, and it's going to return the value of stranger. So if I run this here, you see that I get howdy Alice and then howdy stranger, because if it's null, it enters this second expression right here. So you'll commonly see these check for if a value is truthy or falsy, do something else, do something else. All right. Now you can also nest your ternary operators here. And what this would look like is something like this. So within this function, you could effectively check, okay, is condition 1 truthy? If it is, return this expression. Else, if it's falsy, you could check another condition. And if that's true, return this expression. Else, if that is falsy, you could check another condition, and so on and so forth. However, this is generally not good practice to nest your ternary operators, as if you're just like scanning through your code and you see this just sitting there, now it doesn't look terrible since this is formatted pretty well, but if this was like one long line of ternary operators here, like at a glance, if someone isn't super familiar with JavaScript, they might see this and be like, I have zero idea what's going on here. So in this situation, I would just avoid ternary operators. And this is where I would use a if, and then after your if statement, I would just do else if, check some condition, and then so on and so forth. I think that is going to be a more readable way of checking multiple conditions rather than having this big, long, nested ternary operator. And I would say, in general, ternary operators can be a little bit less readable, and I would be a little bit careful about when you use them. There's, of course, good situations in which you can use them. I think when you're assigning some variable to just like a single value based on a condition, so like you're just checking if a value is like truthy and then assigning it to a value, I think that's a good use case. But if you're really like branching down different paths of your code using a bunch of ternary operators, I think that can get a little bit tricky. So maybe use these a little bit sparingly just to help the readability of your code. But that's not to say you shouldn't use these and that you won't see them. You definitely will. And they can definitely actually look pretty clean in some situations. Like I think right here, this looks like a very clean way to do this. But then in this situation down here, this would get a little bit ugly, especially if the conditions were longer than just one word and those expressions were longer than just one word. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a good understanding of how ternary operators work in JavaScript. Stay tuned for future videos, and I appreciate you checking in.